down below, I think the last thing we were talking about was the insurance and the staff development, but let me just, if I can, a couple questions that you had last time on the revenue side. So I spoke with Phil, and he's saying that our lost pays for this, what is it, 6-month period from July to December was about $1,800.
Sorry, which category was that?
Up in the revenue under, would be under fines.
Okay.
So we were just going to budget for lost pays. So that was his number was about $1,800.
For a 6-month period. Okay.
All right.
So it probably makes sense then that we should budget. You know, we shouldn't leave that as a zero. We should put something in. And you said 1,800 was for 6 months.
You want to put 5 in there,
So
just to be because we were still under construction for a good portion of those months.
At least, yeah. So we only had about 3 months out of the 6 months.
Yeah, probably about 3 months of actual. Yeah, the 3 months from, I don't have that in front of me.
Oh, Tony's here too. No?
Yep. Just got here.
All right. We just started, Tony. We're just looking, revisiting a couple of the open questions from last time. And so Carol had just said that up in the, if you have the spreadsheet in the fines row, we had temporarily zeroed that out because we're not charging fines anymore, but there's still the fees for lost books that are not returned.
Mm-hmm.
And Carol said that for the 6-month period, there was about $1,800 worth of fines, but that also includes a chunk of time when the library wasn't open and people really weren't paying any fines. So we're talking about what number we should reasonably put in there as our expected fine revenue.
The 3 months from October to December is about $1,000 of that 1,800. So that helps.
Okay.
It's not huge, but it's
right. So,
Mike, I wouldn't go too high in that.
Yeah. So, I mean, do we be conservative and say 3,000?
I was even thinking 2,500, but
You think so? Do you think? Well, here's a question: is some of that, is that number inflated a little because it includes people that because they hadn't gone to the library the whole time when the building wasn't open, they didn't pay their fines earlier, so that's kind of lumping fines that were incurred and normally would have been spread out over 2 years or whatever were lumped into a couple month period when people started coming back to the library. So that might be a high. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but just speculating that we might have got kind of a surge of fines paid for, as people started coming back to the library and needed to pay off those fines that people weren't paying over the preceding year. So maybe we do want to go a little lower. I don't know. Again, I'm just speculating here. So
yeah, lower would be better, right? More conservative.
Just more conservative, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Barbara suggested 2,500.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that as a number?
I'm fine. 3,000, 2,500. It seems all kind of arbitrary anyway.
Yeah. And to be honest, because it's a zero budget, we can put, the 2,500 or the 3,000 in there, but knowing that once you get to the bottom of the expenses, if you need to add, 1,000 or 2,000, you can put it in this line. I mean, there's, you know, there's play in the budget. With regards to speculating numbers, because it's, you know, there's so many ways to look at it, as you just said. Maybe it was inflated because people were not paying their fines, or maybe they were getting billed and paying their fines anyway. So it's really,
Yeah, no.
there's no way of knowing exactly what drove that number.
Well, maybe, what do people think? Do we want to do 2,500 for now? And then
Sure.
see where that goes?
Okay.
Revisit it if we need to.
It's fine.
Okay. The other questions we had were when we were looking at dental and vision. I had based it on 33, had asked how many full-time employees we have. We have 34. So the 4125 that we put in that expense line, which is the 1, 2, 3, about the 6th line down under expenses, the dental vision. That's pretty accurate. Ballpark figure. Not every employee will enroll in the vision. It's actually vision because we don't contribute to dental at all. So that's a
Okay.
voluntary. So it's really just vision.
Okay. And so that the 4,125, that's based, that's if we were paying the full vision copay for 33 people. Is that what that number is?
Correct. The 125.
so- Right. So in theory, there's 34. In theory, if every single person signed up, it could actually be 4,250 instead of 4,125. But given that it's extremely unlikely that everybody's going to sign up for that, should we just leave it where we are, or do we want to? What are we thinking?
That's your call.
Can leave it.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, but again, it becomes a little bit of a margin for error kind of thing. Like if 30 show up or 30 sign up, but we've budgeted for 40, then that line has a little bit of money in it that we could theoretically use if we had to for something else. Is that correct?
Theoretically, but I would sort of not advise making, I mean, we don't have 40 employees, so 40 people can't sign up
Mhm.
to add money on a line that,
Right.
unless you're planning on hiring
No.
6 more full-time employees over the next year.
So it should be 34 times
It
125.
could be 34 to be, exact,
4250. Yeah,
assuming no full-time employees leave,
right.
aren't replaced. So,
I mean, if we want to, I'm fine also if we want to put that up to 4,250. So it's just, I mean, that would be our max that we would spend if every single person was
Right.
getting that. So,
okay.
Makes
Uh,
sense.
All right. The number I revised, so I did revise the gross payroll. I based it on 5%. And based on 5% of our actual current payroll, it's still $10,000 less than the budget for the current year. So we can leave it at what it was, the 2,290,000, or we could leave it at 2,280,000. Again, that's your call, how you want to look at it.
Well, I remember Barbara's point from the past meeting that the labor negotiations team from both sides can read. So it might be safer to keep it at 2280 rather than 2290.
Although, Carol, the 2290 is what if the people were working full time at the current rate this year, it would be the 2,290, or Did we overestimate last year?
We overestimated last year.
Okay.
My thought, this is just my personal take on it. I would leave it at the 2,290,000. It will raise less flags on both ends. I mean, going into negotiations, the other parties may say, well, why did you decrease it by 10 million? If you leave it at the, or I mean, if you change it to the 22,280,000, they'll ask why you decreased it. And if you leave it at the 22,90,000, at least it's consistent with where we are right now. And we just say you just current, because they, again, they're going to look for the financials. They can see what the expenses are and say, we just didn't hit that, but that there is money that was budgeted in the current year, which still leaves room for a percentage increase, which is, to Barbara's point, if you raise it above the 2,290,000, then the more you raise it, the more they're going to look at it as money to play with. But I think it would just wave less flags if you just left it at the current 2,290,000, then decreasing it.
I think that's really good rationale, Carol.
That's fine with me.
Me too.
Okay.
All right. I think, looking at my notes. We discussed the retirement invoice, and I look back at past history, and their projection is normally a little bit high, between 2 to 3% higher than what the actual bill will be. So again, we can leave it at the projection. At least we have a ballpark figure as to what they're estimating it to be at the current moment, rather than decreasing. At least we have rationale. I mean, if a taxpayer came and asked, how did you get this number? We can show them. There is documentation from the New York State Retirement saying that we will be billed X number of dollars.
Okay.
Pulling a number and then.
Again, would that be a line that you could play with a little bit and put a little more in there without raising red flags or not?
Again, you probably could by saying we're never sure of what
Right.
going to be billed. I mean, there was a year, it's going back a few, I think it's probably the first or second year that I was with the library, that the invoice came in higher, and that was due to adjustments, past year adjustments that happened prior to my coming on that we needed to make. So our invoice was higher. So I could only go back as far as that point, and that was the only year that it was higher. But again, there's always.
How much, I'm sorry, how much higher was it that year? Do you know?
It was substantial. I think it was like, oh God, I can't remember exactly what it was, but we had made some big adjustments that had not been made with I believe it was with the prior fiscal officer. There was some issues with reporting back then. So we had made the adjustments, and that had an impact.
Okay.
Since then, since the retirement system has changed their system of the way we can actually upload information to them, and our new bookkeeping or payroll system, we don't have those reporting issues any longer.
Okay. And you said it's typically been about 3% below.
2 to 3%.
Okay.
Below what projected invoices.
All right. Well, I'm comfortable using the projected number then for that, if that works with other people. Are everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions?
What was that?
I said, does anybody have I thought something lit up. I didn't know if anybody else had a question. Okay. All right. Well, I think that was basically all the questions that we had, or that you had for me that I was looking into. The only lines that are still up in the air that I'm still trying to drill down on are the equipment leased line, which is at 48. I'm still not sure of what's going on with RFID. That's why this number is where it's at. I don't know what the RFID is. I know we purchased some of the equipment or all of the equipment through the renovation, but I'm not sure if there's going to be expenses tied to that equipment going forward. So that's kind of a work in progress. So I don't have an answer on that line.
Okay.
And the other two lines that I'm talking to Sean in IT about his two lines, which are computer parts and supplies and technology software. And basically we're talking just about the same dollars, maybe a little bit more may be necessary, but we may be flip-flopping where that is. So basically right now he's at, I think it's 15,000 for computer parts and supplies, and 31,000 for technology software. But I want to make sure that we have all of the costs or projected expenses before we actually plug numbers into there. So I want to leave those kind of open to discussion for the next time.
Okay.
And I think that was basically all my homework. So we can pick up with other lines.
So at the beginning of the meeting, it was asked where we stopped last time. And I do remember talking about workers' comp and I believe unemployment and disability. But I personally don't recall talking about telephone. Do I think we might be at telephone on the bottom of page 1?
I think we actually got a little further than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talked about
We-
telephone.
I know we had talked about the printing and the marketing
Oh,
advertising.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Did we get to insurance?
Yes, I believe we did. But we can, if no one's can remember, we can actually discuss that a little bit more.
And I don't know if it was our recent board meeting or our recent budget meeting. I think it was our board meeting where I was asked to give a summary of our recently changed insurance arrangements, and I can probably do that relatively off the top of my head if people need it.
So, I mean, the situation now is that we, instead of the school district, we are insuring the building, whereas before we were only insuring the contents. That's the idea.
That was part of the underpinning of the situation. And the other part was we have 20% more square footage and we're insuring now for the 2022 or 2023 replacement cost. And our old replacement cost figure had needed to be updated, which seemed to be the kind of thing that you don't necessarily think about every year unless you're in a building project. And the upshot of the meeting that Marcia asked for it to be called, Carol was there, David was there, Margaret and myself were there, along with Chris Broussard, is that the overall changes for the year, for the year starting July 1st, would be approximately plus 10,000 over this year. But when we had that meeting, which was in, I think, late October, the prorated change for the current budget year was going to be about 7,000. So that's my recollection. So, and did you already build that in the yellow line there, Carol?
Yes. So
Okay.
I added all of the addendums and revisions that we have from Chris Broussard.
Okay.
So that was, I think, the 30,000, I think, is pretty accurate based on what we have. information from them, as is the cyber insurance.
So cyber, as everybody probably knows, is obviously very necessary, but also so emerging that it's not as actuarially based as a lot of other kinds of insurance, because buildings have been burning down for a long time, but cyber attacks for not such a long time. But we've had extensive conversation with our agent about that. And he thinks we're good. So as good as you can be in that market.
And so it says, I see here, it says that there's based on fiscal year 22 policy of 2530. We've got 2,800 budgeted here for this the next year. Do we think that's a reasonable estimate of the increase in that?
I don't anticipate an increase. I don't think we had an increase for this past year. So I think it's probably reasonable. I don't expect it to be that much higher.
Okay.
But it's, you know, it's got a couple hundred of 250 or 260 or whatever there, just in case, I suppose. So
Almost 10%.
so staff development, if I may go forward to the next one,
Sure.
has my name on it there. Staff development has been 13,000 for a number of years, and this year we are probably going to spend it right to the edge of the 13,000, and that's the big expenses there are 4 different staff attending conferences, but we also pay for a lot of webinars and local travel to workshops and so forth. So I am recommending a $2,000 increase just to put a little breathing room in there. Then again, if the overall process becomes very tight, we can scale back back to the 13,000 with no problem. But as I'm sure you've noticed, everything costs a little more these days, and you know, that line probably should rise a little bit over time. So.
Okay. I guess I'm fine with that for now, at least. I don't know if anyone else has any comments.
I'm fine. I have no idea how much webinars cost or how much, so defer to him.
Most webinars are, you know, $50. Some are as high as 99. They're usually 25 per employee unless you have 4 or more, and then you get a $50 or $60 deal. So, and we were doing a lot of them when we were in the work from home mode, but that should fall off some this year. And I'd be happy to watch that line. If we don't get anywhere near 13 this year, then we could scale it back next year as well.
That was what I was going to ask you, Tim. Would we be doing as many webinars if we're back into operation next year?
Probably not, you know. They are, you know, cheaper than going somewhere to a workshop, but and I think there has been a fairly permanent shift to do a lot of that stuff online. You know, I can live with 13 by any means, but I just kind of think it would be a good idea to have it in there until we have to take it out for whatever reason. So.
And you were saying you're expecting to go right up to the 13 this year?
Yeah.
Because I see that the number for the first 6 months looks like it was a bit low. It was less than 4,000, if I'm reading this right, on the actual versus budget line there.
Mm-hmm.
But is it that there's a lot more in-person things going on in
Yeah.
into 2022?
In March, I've got 2 librarians going to the Public Library Association conference in Portland, Oregon, and I have another one who wants to go to the American Library Association conference in June in Washington, D.C. But those 2 people going to Portland are they're probably about 6,500 together total between the 2 of them. I think 66 was the estimate that I saw. We do have a lot of young librarians, and one of the ways that they build their credentials with civil service and so forth is by attending and presenting at conferences and so forth. So I may not be able to send the person to the American Library Association, but you know, I'm not going over budget. So if there's 2,000 left, then I can say, well, we can fund fundable expenses up to 2,000, and that may or may not affect their decision. But it's good for these people to go to these things.
A quick question. My recollection, again, from your predecessors, is that if the conferences were like on the East Coast, maybe one would go and bring back information.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard of anybody going all the way to the West Coast and 2 people going. So is this different this year?
Well, it just is on the West Coast, the PLA. We did send someone, I want to say 3 years ago before COVID, again to the Pacific Northwest. I think that one was in Seattle, but it was 1 person instead of 2. But most of the time we do stick around here and we do try to drive and so forth. So I don't know the person who wants to go to Washington. When I go to Washington, I drive. But there are times when you can fly there for $99. So, although based on my current research about family vacations, I don't think this is one of those times. But, so if they have to drive to Washington, they can drive to Washington. But it was an unusual request, but we had the available funding, and they're both good young librarians who had good reasons for going, in my opinion. So, so I said yes. So I said everything has to be refundable because of COVID, in case they make that conference go virtual. But it's not looking like they will.
Okay. Well, what do we think? Do we want to leave this at 1,500? Does anybody have a strong feeling one way or the other on that number right now?
I'm okay with the 1,500. I mean, staff development I think is important. So,
50,000. Yeah. Okay. So
15,000.
15,000. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
okay.
right. All right. So why don't we leave that for now at 15,000? Works.
So staff recruitment, in my opinion, is just fine at 500. We are probably going to go over a little bit because I've been running ads on Indeed.com, but we'll stop that pretty soon. And we should fill these 2 positions soon, Carol's position and Margaret's. And other lower level positions tend to be recruitment through free services. So I think 500 is prudent just in case, but I don't think I'm aware of any need to advertise any positions, hopefully over the next year, that we can't advertise locally and for free. Carol, any other thoughts on that?
No, the only other positions, excuse me, that you might need to, that you would have to pay for advertising could be for maintenance, because that's not a civil service, but that would be the only, either admin or maintenance.
So about board development, how did we, I guess we spent $5 maybe on somebody's oath of office.
Yeah, typically just the oath of office. We've always had about 2,000 left in there in case you wanted to do retreats or whatever, but past couple of years that hasn't been a possibility. So
Do you know in the pre-pandemic times when there have, I guess there have been retreats in the past, is that right?
A few, 1 in my time, I think, in 8 years. So,
do you know what kind of cost they usually ran? Is that 2,000?
I think it was just, we have the 11-member board, and I think what we did is that we went to the clubhouse at Heritage Village Apartments and catered a modest meal. So I'm guessing it was probably $200 or something like that, and then maybe another $200 to use the clubhouse. Although if I remember right, we had some kind of a connection and we got that clubhouse for free. So,
Right.
you know,
Somebody on the board lived there or had a connection and they let us use it for free.
yeah. So typically, you know, I'm in favor of such things, but it's been difficult with COVID to get everybody together, even for a regular meeting, let alone a retreat. So,
Yeah, I think it would be good, you know, to try and get back into that as it's possible. I don't know. It sounds like the 2000 is you know, that's a bit high, even if we start, you know, doing more of those again. So maybe we might want to knock that down a little, just because it's very unlikely we're actually going to spend that.
it would seem to me you could go cut it in half.
Yeah.
I wonder if one of the reasons it's so high is that it's theoretically possible that you might want to hire some national consultant to come in and look at your cybersecurity, or I don't know, something. But we haven't really done that sort of thing. So, you know, I don't want to cut you guys' funds, but it hasn't been spent, Carol, I don't think in the last, even before COVID, right?
Not in my 5 years.
Mhm.
Tim, and the other thing that money has been used for when the trustees conferences are held,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
they've been used for that. But again, for the last 2 years, nothing like that has happened.
Yep.
Oh, and also, isn't it UHLS dinner? Is it?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's part of it. But then the Library Association itself also has like quarterly meetings. And sometimes they're down in Long Island, sometimes they're in our area. I don't think we ever went to one out in Buffalo, but you know, we have had some participation in that, not a lot.
Mhm.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of leaving, you know, some funds in there. So hopefully we can start doing those types of things again. I don't know if we've never spent anywhere close to $2,000. I don't know that we need to leave that much on the line, but what do other people think about that?
Well, again, the only advantage if you leave the line as such, and if your negotiations, you know, require more money than we have in the payroll line, you can
Yeah.
shift, you know, some of that money up to that line, if necessary. That would be the only, you know, only reason to keep it there.
Right, right.
We're also hoping for a better year. Less
Can I
virtual.
ask something? Who's been really in charge usually of doing anything like dinner or anything for the board development in past years?
Well, usually Upper Hudson has the availability of, you know, training sessions, seminars that they'll bring to the board. And they've done that a number of times. And I know for the Long Range Planning Committee in October, Tim Burke and another young lady did a nice presentation as, you know, how you develop your long range plan and all that. But when it comes to the board itself, like locally, it's usually, you know, the board itself that sees a need for something in particular and, you know, asks Tim or whoever to see if there's consultants or speakers that would address the particular issue. And, you know, then sometimes they have a special meeting or meet on a Saturday. So basically, you know, that's all I've ever experienced.
Barbara, let me ask, for my sake and also for Narina's, remember we used to get together in December, I think it was the board and the foundation, at Dorado's, and have a dinner. How was that funded?
That was individually funded, but the guests that were honored, you know, in other words, somebody that's gone off the board, they and their spouse were paid for, out of these funds.
Okay.
But the dinner itself, was paid by the individual.
I'm looking at history, and the only year that I can see a substantial amount of money being paid was May of 2019. There was a board dinner held at Tesoro Italian Restaurant that cost about $850 just for board members. So, but that was the only year. That's the anomaly. Even the Upper Hudson Library dinner that I mentioned, that was only $280. That was still the same year, but that was only $280.
I wonder if that May 2019 was a celebration of passing the referendum. I remember being there, but I don't remember the overall reason that we spent $850. But anyway.
That's the only, I went back to 2016. And that's the only year that there was any substantial expense. So again, you might be correct, Tim.
That was the month of the referendum. So.
The reason I'm asking is because with so many new board members, I may see a need for some kind of team building activity or dinner or, presentation where we all can get together and sort of shake off the formalities for a little bit. But obviously, I don't know that would cost $2,000. I'm just putting that idea out there.
Noreen, that was one of the really nice things when we had the annual dinner, because you got to meet each other's spouses and, you weren't talking shop, you were just talking family and things that are happening in the world and just what you're describing.
Right. I think we need that. I realize COVID is an impediment, but I really do think we need that. Hopefully in the summer.
The other thing that we did once, Tim, we had sort of like a potluck dinner. Trustees and their families and the foundation and their families. And we did that right at the library.
Yep, I would love to do that in the summer. And I think that the only expenses for that were like for sodas, things like that. There
Right.
might have been a couple trays of lasagna or something from a local restaurant, but mostly it was potluck,
Right.
I do just want to say that I agree with Norina. The turnover on the board has been severe over the last 3 years. And but the positive side of that is that we've got a lot of new board members. We're back up to 11. We'll be incorporating these 2 that you guys have named. And maybe by the spring, it'll be safe to get together,
If the open meetings law goes back into effect, then we'll be getting back together.
Yep.
Or is no longer suspended, I should say.
In terms of number, I think I'm okay with leaving it as it is. And then if you need it somewhere else, you could just move that around. But that's just my opinion.
Anybody else thoughts on that?
I'm okay leaving it as it is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay with that. So why don't we leave that there and we can move on?
All right. I did.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
I don't think attorney fees have changed again this year, correct?
Right. There has been no increase in that. There's no increase in our auditor or accounting firm. Payroll services, we've never exceeded the 12,000. That's pretty accurate. They're not increasing their costs either. So that's why I left those where they are. UHLS, I think we did briefly discuss this. Or I may have just mentioned it.
I'm supposed to call them.
You were gonna call, right?
I'm still gonna call them. I was on the phone with him an hour ago, but on something else. And I'll make myself a note as we speak.
Now, what's included in that number there? On the spreadsheet, it says TechCom. In
So
parentheses.
basically, it's the joint catalog that the 29
Okay.
libraries administer together. There's a few little asides to that. Anything you can say, Carol, to highlight besides the catalog itself?
Let me see, ULAN and e-commerce. So it's those charges. We did raise it last or this current year because we had anticipated an increase of 2% increase that did not happen.
And that was because, if I remember right, in like November or December, the state told the statewide library community that they could expect a 20% funding cut. And that's not us, but that's the systems that run, like UHLS. There's, I think, 35 of them around the state. And then that cut was, partially restored and then partially restored and then partially restored, and ended up being like a 1% cut at the end of the year. So we might need to go back down just to, I'll call him and ask him if what they're anticipating for this year. So
the 55 might be inflated and we may be able to cut that.
are you able to easily see what it was last year? The year before?
The year before paid them over the year. Hold on.
I want to say 46.
So does it make sense for us to kind of hold off on this line until Tim, until you get in touch with them and find out, see what they say?
Fine with me.
I would wait to get a actual. Oh, yeah, the system does year end based on calendar year, not fiscal year. But actually, it's not even giving me that. Well, through June of 2021, so that's, oh, that is our fiscal year. Okay, I take that back. It was 37,545.
Ooh,
So
okay, I'll call Tim and find out.
Okay.
Because obviously we don't need if we don't need 55, that's a place to conserve.
All right, so that makes sense. I mean, if we can chop that down by more than $10,000 or 15 or whatever, we should know that. So why don't we just hold off on that until we find out more?
If I get an answer quickly, I'll email, the whole group.
Okay.
And, if Tim Burke says, oh, it's going to be, 40,000, I think we should just go ahead and have Carol change it based on that phone call if we get that info.
consulting fees.
So I see that we're a little over budget this year on the consulting fees. Do we know what that was related to?
Hey,
Ah,
it's
makes sense.
Margaret and me. I mean, in a typical year,
That
typically
makes
our
sense.
library doesn't have consulting fees of a substantial amount. So, I mean, I don't anticipate still being a consultant in July. Stranger things have happened, but
Well, it's a good moment to
It
just
should
jump
go
in and
back.
say that both Carol and Margaret have been, conservative in terms of what they've charged us for, and extremely helpful. So it's a good thing to have that in the budget line. But I don't think we're gonna need as much next year.
It's nice to have it in your back pocket if you need.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I think, well, this kind of shows, you know, how we needed some money there, and actually we needed a little more than we had in there this year, I guess, so maybe we just want to leave that line how as it is, expecting to be underneath it, but being prepared in case something happens again that requires us to spend more.
Sounds prudent to me. I would imagine if Carol had it at a glance, we've never spent in her 5 years anywhere close to that. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in a year-over-year way where you can say, oh, there's 20,000 we didn't spend over the last 4 years. So
Okay, so library organizations, those are Chamber of Commerce. I can't, the other ones all escape me at the moment, but
ALA, right? And NYLA, New York Library Association. Yep. So. Mhm.
So I see on this, it is only showing $600 spent, but I'm guessing some of these are probably annual dues that would only show up might only show up in the second half of the year here. So do we know if that number, you know, when all is said and done at the end of the year, do we expect that 3,000 to be in the ballpark of what we're going to spend?
it might be a little high. I mean, looking at the actual for 2021, the expense was only at 1,290. So unless there's some new organizations that we are joining, or we have new people that are going to be subscribing to something, might be a little high.
Carol, didn't we also pay for the trustees association dues for that?
That would be either here or board development, right? Would either one work, Carol?
Would probably be board. You could put it in either one and be.
Yeah, it's a library organization, so that would be similar to ALA, so I think it should be in that line. And that's what, about $300?
I think you're right, yeah. Although Barbara, you'd be proud of me. One year, the newsletter for the Trustees Association was so expensive. I said, well, let's just get one and then we'll photocopy it.
Remember that, yes.
But anyway, which is a copyright violation. I probably shouldn't have said that on a live stream meeting. Anyway.
Yes, we have a couple of Chamber of Commerce that are in there. So we have Capital Region, we have the Guilderland Chamber of Commerce, ALA. Just going over the past couple of years. It's ranged about $1,200 to $1,300.
So it looks like we're a little higher than we need to be on this. If 12 or 13, do we want to, we've got 3,000 budgeted, should we go down to 2 maybe? And that still gives us a buffer over what we've been, if the last several years, it's always been in the 12 or 1,300 range. Seems like we can carve a little bit off there. You know, it's
Carol, can you see what we paid the dues to the trustees association?
Not find it. Not sure what would that be? What vendor would it be? Do you know? Would it been to ALA or what is
No,
that?
it's a separate organization for library trustees, New York State Library Trustees Association, I think it is.
Let me see. Search it.
I think they might call it LITA, L-I-T-A.
Yeah. Going back a few years here. My database. Have not actually paid that since 2018. It was $308.
Well, is that just something that slipped through the cracks then?
Could well be. You know, we,
Video, an annual membership, yeah, for 2018.
Yeah, right, it's just like, you know, the Chamber of Commerce or any of these other groups, it's an annual type of thing.
it's probably worth doing. I can ask Jenna to look it up, and see what it currently costs.
So that would add another 300 or 350 to your potential total too.
I made a note to talk to her tomorrow.
So it'd be 2,000 rather than 3, or we can wait to speak with Jenna.
Does that sound okay to everyone?
Yeah, I would wait until you speak to Jenna, sure.
Sounds okay.
Yeah, I would be fine with that too.
Okay, it's fine.
Building maintenance and supplies. We are already. Let's see, we're at 31. 31% of the budget has been spent so far. Once we have more traffic, I would expect more supplies being necessary. You know, tissue paper and hand paper, cleansers, things like that. Right now we have limited number of patrons using bathrooms and things like that. So I wouldn't really recommend cutting this expense line.
Yeah, especially with more square footage.
Exactly, more square footage and more bathrooms.
Mhm.
Want to raise it up a little?
We have a sense of what that number, I know things are, different with after the renovation and everything, but do we have a sense of what we were spending the year or two before the pandemic?
I can get out.
Thing to think we have to adjust for though is what is the rate of inflation is something like 8% now. So whatever it was, 2 years ago, we probably should allow for price increases.
Back to 2019. What a scrolling. Getting there. Actually, fiscal year ending June 2019, that budget line had expense of 27,862. $2020, but 3 months of the pandemic in there. Too far. It was almost exactly the same number for an ending year, June 30th, 2020 was almost 28,000. So it's been 28,000 for the last 2 years prior to the pandemic.
And that was
Okay.
old building without the,
Yeah, right, correct.
Right. So it seems like this may be a reasonable number then. It's a significant bump from what we were spending just before the pandemic, but we do have the bigger building. I don't know.
think it looks good considering the previous numbers.
Don't forget too that, you know, a lot of the technologies we installed are supposed to save energy. So if we are still, am I reading that correctly, Carol, that we're
No, this is,
23,000
this-
ahead?
No,
this isn't the utilities. This is just supplies.
Oh, supplies. Okay, got it. Got it. Actually, you know, it theoretically should have been higher in the year we reopened because I assume that's the line we bought all the PPE from and so forth. But anyway,
Yes.
spraying devices and so forth.
Well, the devices are under the cleaning and equipment,
Oh, okay.
down a little bit.
So if we just leave it at the 40,000, you'd have a little bit of a cushion if you know, needed some monies on another line too.
Agreed.
The thing that taxpayers hate to see is a jump in a category, even though all their expenses have gone up. So if it stays the same, you know, it's a little less of a question for them.
So we're leaving that at 40.
Works for me.
I think that makes sense.
As I said before, so computer parts and technology, we're still looking into that, so we'll skip over that. And then building equipment, cleaning and maintenance. These are basically for any equipment that Lou would need to purchase and any services, snow removal, I don't know, the maintenance on any of the heat pumps and things like that. And we need to bring plumber in or an electrician. That's basically where these lines that's where that would go. So we kept it the same. We had raised it for the current budget year by 4,000, and I don't know if you want to increase this theoretically. It should be pretty consistent given that not the entire building, but a good portion of the building is new.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that for now, at least to leave that.
Okay.
Me too.
Me too.
Did we, the technology software line, is that also something we need to look into, or is that one?
Yeah, I'm still looking into that. I'm still talking to Sean to see exactly what his expenses are going to be.
Okay.
Okay, so we're good with building equipment and cleaning, maintenance. Utilities, it's at 50,000. We have already spent almost 56% of that budget line. I would recommend probably increasing it, even though, as Tim was saying, we do have energy efficient lighting and whatnot, but it's still, we added square footage to the building. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't increase it substantially, but I think a small bump might be more.
Do you know what's the rough breakdown of those costs between our different utilities?
I don't have it in front of me. I can't quickly pull it, but I can. You need me to do that. Or you mean between electric and gas, I'm assuming.
What else is included in there?
Water, you know.
Water. No, actually, water has its own line.
Oh,
So
that's right.
it's just gas and electric.
And I would say, based on the bills that I see, it's roughly 80-20, if not 85-15. Does that ring a bell, Carol? Or
Yes. The only thing I can say is that for the 12-month period for our gas was extremely low, basically because we were not in the building. Much lower than it would have been compared to previous years. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I just know that that number was really low. We were unable to actually get a contract with for our cost, our thermal cost, because they had passed, so the state or whatever had passed a law saying that a broker could not get into a contract or enter into a contract with an organization if their therms were not at, over a 12-month period, at 1,750. And it took us up until January to hit that therm. So we were unable to get contract locking us into cost for the next 3 years. We were actually just able to, just as it was expiring, we were able to get a new contract for that. So I know the cost was, or our usage was down over because of last winter.
and then the one other thing to add going forward is the natural gas fireplace is a fairly significant additional user of natural gas. So whatever the breakdown has been in the past, it'll be slightly different in the future.
Tim, does that run all the time or just if somebody pushes a button and wants to sit in front of it?
We turn it on every morning this time of year, but you know, obviously not in the summer or anything. Plus, we've been saving money because, as I mentioned at the board meeting the other day, it only recently became fully operational. So it had only run about probably 30 hours since September 28th when we reopened, and then about 2 weeks ago we got it fixed. So.
Now, is there a remote though that you wouldn't have to run it all the time and just if somebody wanted to sit there, they could turn it on?
You could. I don't think you'd want to leave the remote out for the public. It would probably disappear, and then you'd be stuck, you know. But I suppose we could look into flipping a switch, but actually, since the doors have opened a little wider, there's pretty much always somebody sitting on at least one side of it. I wonder if there's any kind of motion sensor. That'd be kind of fun. You know, you walk by it and you feel like you're the devil from Damn Yankees, you know? So.
Well, I'll look on National Grid's website and see if they even have, they may have a tool that would give you a projected usage over the next 12 months. I know they give you past usage. So maybe there's some sort of little cool tool out there that would project it. If not, we can just go on. I can look at the last 2 years and see what, or 2 or 3 years and see what it is, and then extrapolate it out for the additional square footage.
That sounds good to me.
Water sewer has been a little, it's been high. Don't know if that's just based on, again, past year when we were not actually in the building.
I wonder if that's been a cost thing. You know, the town has been making strong efforts to try to increase the supply by connecting to Rotterdam. And I think also by fixing the piping underneath Stuyvesant Plaza in that area. But I wonder if it's just a cost increase that's been happening.
Well, as I look at the sheet here, it looks like we've in the 6 months that are reflected on here, we only spent a couple $100s. Is that just the way they bill it, that it hasn't been
I think it's
billed
the
yet?
way it's billed, actually. I'm looking at, we just received our invoicing. That's why I want,
We did, and it seemed rather high to me.
it's about, so to date, through the end of January, the balance is that we've spent almost $5,800.
That's from July through January, is that, or what period?
Yes, that's July through January. And the prior year was at 6,400. We should receive another, so we get the bulk of our bill for the water and sewer in December. And then I have a small sewer bill. It's probably for one of the lots. There are two small bills, one in January and then another in March. That equals about $450. And it's probably the lots. So the additional lots that we have.
Did you say we're at 5,800 through January? Was that the number?
Yes. 5,750 actually.
Okay, so that, I mean, that seems like we're in line with what's budgeted here then, right? I mean,
Well, I think we're budgeted for, our budget is at 12,000 and we were probably not going to hit that. If it's probably going to be closer to 6,500, probably half of this.
okay.
Now, the thing, Carol, though, this summer, we didn't have a lot of people even working there, and you didn't have, I don't know if we had any foot traffic in the summer. I've lost track when we opened our doors. I think it was in the fall. So, your toilets aren't flushing and you aren't doing crafts and things like that use water. So, hopefully as we open up, those costs will go up a little bit more.
Looking at history, so in 2018, June 2018, the annual expense was $8,200. 2019, it's at $6,750. 2020 is $6,400 or $6,430. So it's ranging anywhere from whatever it was, $6,400 to $8,000. So might want to shave a couple thousand off of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess based on those numbers, it looks like we could go down, maybe down to 10 or something, and we'd still have a little buffer over what we've been spending.
Yep, I agree.
I'd agree to 10.
All right. Okay, well, that's basically it. The capital improvements line is basically how that's the number that balances the expenses with the revenue. So depending on what the impact of these changes will be, this number will change.
Right. And this past year, I'm assuming any capital improvements were coming out of our construction budget, not out of our regular budget. So that's why there's no money spent on that.
Correct.
So while I have all of you though, let me ask a question about that. So the design steering committee, which Kathy is on, is meeting Wednesday. And we do have a need to replace the air cooling unit or chiller that's out on the loading dock. And also we're sort of in midstream on redoing the walls in the Helderberg room. And the preliminary report from Megan Brennan is that each of those is going to be about twice as expensive as she had previously thought. And so without getting into that committee's business, my theoretical question is, you know, could we do one of those projects out of the building project and another one out of this line if we had to?
How much do we have left in the building project? We had quite a bit left, didn't we?
Yeah, it was about $500,000 the last time she reported. So I don't know, and probably won't know until Wednesday. But those numbers she had sent us in an email would chew up a lot of that, you know? So,
But there's money in the construction.
yeah,
But, so
I'm just sort of being theoretical about it.
Okay.
So the two things, one of them was, it was a painting thing you said, or?
No, so the walls of the Helderberg room are made of like a soundproof cloth
okay.
panel kind of deal. And you can hang art on it, plus it absorbs sound. And those we committed to replacing, but it looks like it's going to be about twice as much as she thought. And then the chiller is the giant unit in the back of the building that allows air conditioning to function. And when the building project started, the advice we had gotten from the engineers on the project was we might be able to get 5 or 6 extra years out of it. So a previous incarnation of the design committee said, well, you know, if you told me at my house that I could get 5 or 6 more years out of my central air conditioner, I probably would try to, rather than replacing it proactively or preemptively. And then it blew on us this last fall, meaning that it now has to be replaced before the next air conditioning season. And we have been planning to do it out of the building project so far, just because there was an overage there and, or an underage, if you will. You know, and that obviously could remain the plan. I was just asking if there was a, you know, there is of course a public relations value to saying we finished the project with X amount of money on hand. And, you know, that number's going down. So
On my
anyway,
mind, that chiller obviously has to be replaced. Are we talking $80,000 here? How much?
that's, I believe, the high end of the, we have a choice between aluminum and stainless steel. And if I remember her email correct, aluminum was like 60 and stainless was like 80. And stainless is thought to last a little longer, but when we meet on Wednesday, I want to ask some questions about, you know, how much longer. You know,
Yeah.
so when Lou talks about them, he says that they're, you know, like any other appliance, even though it's a giant appliance, they're not made as well as they used to be, you know. So then you have to decide, do you buy the cheap one, knowing that it's going to blow in 10 or 12 years, or do you buy the expensive one, hoping to get 20 or 30 years out of it, you know? So, but Megan will be prepared to fill us in on that on Wednesday.
The other question, why are we replacing the walls in the Helderberg room? Is it because there are too many holes from our projects, or why did we decide to do that?
So at the beginning of the project, we were not planning to do it. So that means that you are asking a good question, because you may remember that. Basically, they got so dirty in the use of the Helderberg room from construction that if you go in and look closely at them, they're a little nightmarish looking, particularly the lower half of them, where a lot of heavy industrial machinery bumped up against them and so forth. And we did notice that there were a lot of stains in them that were from programming use that we weren't aware of until we emptied out the room and said, oh man, those look terrible. So that's kind of the backstory there. It's mostly wear and tear from construction.
And how much is that?
Well, I can't quite remember. Kathy, do you happen to remember?
40,000?
I'm searching my email.
Oh, the panels, you mean?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I know I got an email about the revised estimate, and I'd have to find it because I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just found it. It's 63,000.
Okay.
So aside from just the, you know, PR side of, you know, whether we come in under budget and how much under budget, is there a any big advantage to whether this just comes out of our normal, annual budget, or if it gets rolled into the bond with the construction? What is the pros and cons of being funded one way versus the other?
Well, I'm not a finance expert, but our general MO since the bids came in so low on the construction project has been that anything at all that our facility needed, if it was legal and ethical to include it in the building project, we did. And so that would be my gut answer to your question, is that, currently we are planning for both of these costs, the chiller and the Helderberg room, to come out of the construction budget. And now that I think about it, if you add 63 and 80, it's, 145, 150, which there's still a $500,000 in that credit line. So you still get, if you bought both of these through the building construction project, you'd still get to claim that you saved a significant amount of money from the original envisioned cost of the project. Plus, the other advantage I see, Mike, is, it's highly unlikely, but if something massive goes wrong with the building in the next year, then our annual budget is untouched in this regard. And could be transferred to capital at the end of this year if it wasn't spent. So, I don't know what could happen, but, a hurricane tears the roof off or something. Having the operating budget around would, you only get one operating budget a year, and you only get a construction project bond every, 20, 30 years. So the gift of being under budget on the bond just takes some stress off of the annual budget, I guess I'd say, or even potential stress.
Right. So, I mean, both of those things seem to me things that just, reasonably fit within the construction project. One is just, redoing the walls of a room just as part of the general renovation, even if it wasn't originally planned, it fits in. And the other is updating systems, which is something, you want to do as you're doing a big renovation project, if it makes sense. So I don't think it would be unreasonable to leave both of those where they are, unless there's an advantage to us pulling them out. But that's just my 2 cents.
I am, in a way, sort of sorry I brought it up, given that it's 5:20 and we're all probably wanting, if we're not home, we're probably wanting to go home. I was looking at a kind of a theoretical answer, and I suppose theoretically you could do whatever you want, but the strategic, you asked the right question right there, Mike. The strategic thing to do seems to be to take those two out of the construction budget.
Mhm. Yeah, the only advantage of pulling out the walls, you're not paying interest on that money, but as Tim pointed out, if something catastrophic happened, you really want to have some money in your capital fund as well, to cover those unanticipated costs.
Right. All right. Well, what's our next steps on the budget process here? We still, we have some open questions we need to get answered on some of those lines. And where do we go from?
All right, I'll revise the sheet that you have based on the changes that you told me to make. And I'll send that back out to you. And then the next meeting, we should have answers to the open questions that we have, and that would be basically it.
So then you present, I'm not looking at the timetable in front of me, but if it's that cut and dried, we would basically, inform the rest of the board about it at the February meeting. And I think, give them a chance to ask questions related to all these various assumptions and so forth. Then I think if I remember right, you finalize it at the March meeting because they need the dollar amount on the ballot that's getting printed. The third Thursday in March is relatively late in March. So the ballot's getting printed in April and then getting voted on in the second week of May. Does that ring a bell, Barbara Fratterigo? Having done it so many times, if you don't mind my putting it that way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
On track.
Mhm. Yep. So. But that's kind of the basic process.
I'm looking at the timetable and it's saying the week of it says February 21st. Final copy distributed to the board. So I guess you would present it to the board in the February meeting.
Okay. Carol, we requested and got a spreadsheet from John Rizzo at the school district about tax refunds. Have you had a chance to look at that?
Not in depth.
Okay, I'll take a look as well. I have trouble printing from Excel, so I asked Jenna to figure it out for me. Actually during this meeting, so I'll probably have that tomorrow.
Okay, we have anything else we need to take care of right now?
Do you want to set a meeting date?
Probably a
Just
good
to-
idea.
Yeah,
All right. Look at
And-
the calendar.
from my perspective, what we're doing here works fine. I suppose the only one thing I might throw in there, and it might gum up the works, but Monday being the first day of any given week, you're catching up on a lot of stuff. But if Tuesday doesn't work just as well for people, then it would be fine to continue on Mondays.
Tuesdays are good.
Day was that? I didn't hear, Marina.
Tuesdays work best for me.
Oh, Tuesday. Okay.
Tuesdays is difficult for me. Usually I'm busy I don't get home until late.
What's the date of our February board meeting?
We're 17th, I think, right?
I'm looking for a calendar.
Yep.
Third,
Wow.
third Thursday would be the 17th.
Yeah, 17th.
Do we want to try and meet? Do we want to meet next week or want to go 2 weeks, do something the week of the 7th, which is the week before the board meeting?
If you do the week of the 7th, then you have a little more time for Carol to get all the stuff and
Yeah.
the computer people, and there's a little bit of homework that people are doing.
I'm with you there.
All right. Well, so can everybody do Monday? If that's a day that Tony, that's a better day for you, you said?
Yeah, I mean,
I
rest. Mhm.
Yeah, I can make whatever you guys choose. I'll make it happen.
All right.
Yeah.
Same time then, 4 o'clock?
So February 7th, 4 o'clock.
If that works for
Sounds
everybody,
good.
then
Yeah, it's fine.
With me.
all right.
For me,
All right. That works. That's our next committee meeting then.
Okay.
All right.
thanks, everybody.
All
All
right.
right, thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Good night.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good night.